Hey, just want to welcome everybody. This is the first season and prior to the first week of the Broken Teeth and Bloody Turf League. We're going to be trying to do updates every week to show what the teams are doing and what we think about them. I'm here with SierraKilo.
Greetings.
And he's going to be going with me through a lot of this, and we're going to go right now and just do a wrap up of the teams before the season starts. Right now, overall, what do you think of the teams, SK?
I think they're really well balanced. We're looking at a good grouping of traditional teams, some of the normal to play intro folks, and some of the more high skill teams. So it'll be pretty interesting to see how some of the newer players do with the more traditional, more balanced teams versus some of the folks who've been playing this a little bit longer, who are going to have to kind of step their game up and work within the framework of the chosen teams that they're going to be playing this season.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. We are having a lot of beginner players, but most of them have picked teams that are pretty easy to grasp, while the more veteran players have picked at least somewhat more difficult teams, so it should balance itself out through the season. We'll have to see for this first season. For teams that we have, the first on the list we have is actually my team. I didn't do it that way, but the Pitch Doctors, Goblins team. What do you think about my team?
Well, I like the way that you've played it for your setup, where you have a couple secret weapons, which definitely is intimidating to a new player because they're not really sure unless they've done a really good job of researching the rules and how they're going to impact the playfield. I see that you have a Fanatic, which of course the secret weapon, the ball and chain, which is definitely a powerful player as long as you can control it. You've got two Trolls, a Pogoer, which is definitely an interesting player because of stunty and the very long legs. A Looney with a chainsaw, so another secret weapon. Bombardier, again secret weapon. And then the rest of your 11 players are going to be your Goblins. So it'll be interesting to see how people play against that, in my opinion, and seeing what you can do with those players before a first score. Because the secret weapon, you're going to definitely need to make sure that you have a bribe on there, because the last thing you need is to lose, what do you have, 3 of your players.
Yeah, that's, what, 25% of my team are going to get kicked off in the first drive unless I do something about it?
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the skill aspect of that team.
Yeah, the big thing that I'm worried about, obviously I built the team, so I'm pretty happy with what I did. The only thing I'm worried about is early season, getting my players knocked out real soon between Secret Weapon and Goblins just being a little fragile. So, yeah, probably playing with half a hand throughout most of the game is going to be pretty rough, but I'm hoping that the Trolls and the 6 rerolls will help mitigate that.
Yeah, I think that's an important aspect to do as well, because you spent 6 rerolls right off the bat. You're not running an apothecary, cheerleaders, or an assistant coach to start with.
Yeah. For this one, I think it's going to really have to go down to what the first couple games look like. Depending on that, it may change what my teams actually do. Let's go ahead and move to the Chaos team, exactly as planned.
Right.
What do you think about them?
Chaos is interesting, and I think that they're definitely one of the traditional teams that we're going to be playing with. So this team picked 2 rerolls, 4 Chaos Warriors, and
7 Beastmen.
Say that again?
7 Beastmen.
Yeah. Yeah, 7 Beastmen. So you're looking at a pretty basic team where your beastmen are running 6 movement allowance, your 3 strength, 3 agility, and then the 8 armor value. And your chaos warriors are a little stronger, a little better armor value, but are sacrificing 1 movement allowance.
Yeah, I think this team's going to be pretty strong. I think the 2 rerolls might be a little painful going in. You know, I'm a big guy in the rerolls. But I think the only thing that this team might suffer from is a just throughout lack of block, which there's not really much you can do to fix it. But in combination of rerolls and the lack of block, some bad rolls could really set them off to a really bad start with exactly as planned.
Absolutely, but I think that they're going to be a little bit punchy because of horns on the beastmen, which is what Chaos is designed to do. So as long as they do a fairly good job of assisting their players, they can definitely do some damage, which means that lower armor value teams are gonna need to be very aware of where those beastmen are and how they're distributed on the field.
Yeah, exactly. That's the potential of just based 5 strength 4 characters in a single run if you count the blitz with the beastmen. So there is a lot of pain to be dealt out. Just really got to go that risk-reward route and just hope for a little bit of luck. Otherwise, I think this team is a pretty strong choice. I don't think I could have made a much better list to begin with.
No, I absolutely agree. That's pretty much how I would have balanced it as well. And I think that the development of the team is going to determine their success or failure for the rest of the season.
Yeah, we'll see if those players can pick it up and go from where the coach started.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be whether or not they can get the right star player points to the right folks and protect them throughout the season to get the necessary skills to make them a competitive team.
Yeah,
in the later
and the armor value won't hurt too much. And let's move on to the Iron Beer Bellies. This is the Flying Coconuts team. Dwarves. I do like dwarves. A lot of blockers in there. I think he's got he's got 5 blockers. I do like that, and then he's got an even smattering of 2 runners, 2 blitzers, and 2 troll slayers. So a pretty even smattering of team in this dwarf team.
Right. Yeah, it'll be good because some of the newer players need to be aware of the frenzy on the troll slayers. That's something that I remember in my first couple seasons I'd mistakenly placed too many players too close to the edge of the pitch, and that's a free knockout.
Yeah.
Having the block on so many players is very nice because the blitzers and the blockers obviously have it. You're starting off with tackle on the blockers, which is something that a newer team is going to have to research and make sure that they know what impact that has on the field.
Yeah, definitely. I think the choice of giving a good even amount of players, or rather types of players, is going to be very helpful. But as all dwarf teams, I think they're going to struggle a little bit on the ball handling, but they're going to definitely dull out the harshness.
Right, absolutely, which is why it's really important to have 2 runners on the field with sure hands. You're still only dealing with a 6 on the movement allowance for the runners, so it's going to be a big positional play where these guys aren't going to be running all the way up the field because your blockers have 4 movement allowance and your blitzers have and your troll slayers have 5. So you need to create that pocket and use your strength effectively to slowly but surely move the ball up.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really good team. I think the 3 rerolls was a pretty sweet spot for this dwarf team, and I'm actually kind of afraid of them. I think they're going to do very well this season. I would be surprised if they didn't make it deep into the playoffs.
In the history of the leagues that we've played, that there's been a little bit of better than average luck on goals for
Flying Coconuts. Yeah, he's definitely crazy about those 1-die tackles, and they always seem to work out. So between that and being the very reliable dwarves, I think he's going to do very well.
Man, I don't know if it's just not keeping a pocket calculator handy or just your guts, but it seems to work for him.
Hey, follow your heart, right?
Right.
All right, now we're going to not to stroke your ego, but a team that I was really impressed with for multiple reasons. But the Nordic Kneecappers, it's actually your team.
Well, thank you very much. That's from somebody like you. That's a big deal.
I really like this team. We're looking at 1 runner, 2 Norse werewolves, and 8 linemen, and it did not go unnoticed by me that all of the players are last name Nordic Son, except for one of your werewolves is Puppy Dog Face, not my son. So, for how much it's worth, you get 300 experience points from me, because that is a really awesome team name setup.
I appreciate that. I actually even edited the team history, so that's it's the detail in things like this that make it fun.
Well, and the dice gods will smile on you for doing such a good job, so that should.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah, 4 rerolls though. Man, the dice gods might not need to be on your side with 4 rerolls and an apothecary.
Well, I look at it like this, where the frenzy of the Norse werewolves are great. But when you're playing a team that has a lot of block, sometimes you get a little overconfident on the dice rolls. At least I do. So being able to take back a marginal choice with the werewolves is going to be a big deal. Plus, with an armor value of 7 for everything but the werewolves, I don't want these guys to go down very often. And I'm not going to be afraid to throw a 1-die block because of having the block skill. And if you get 4 rerolls and with a little bit of fan factor later, a couple extra rerolls being picked up by one side or the other is going to, I think, make the difference in this.
Yeah, I really like those werewolves. They're kind of cage lightning with the frenzy and the strength 4. I think you could do a lot with them, but without tempering yourself with a little bit of caution, they can work against you. But I think with the rerolls and what you've been practicing preseason with these, with basically the same team for quite a while.
I've had a lot of success with them, and I've learned. I think the most important thing with these guys is how the skill tree unfolds for me, and because it's essentially a human team with block, they're still a little bit fragile, so you have to be careful. But the abilities that these guys have with their movement allowance, a moderate strength, and a moderate armor value, I think I can go places with them. And I did spend a lot of money on rerolls instead of getting a big guy, because I know that I'd rather have all of my players be engaged than have to worry about somebody who's just an ineffective player on the field that costs a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah, those big guys, and if they just happen to get that kill on you, that's a lot of money that's out of your box at that point. And I think you made a good choice here. 4 rerolls with 2 werewolves and the rest linemen. Can't count the Norse linemen out. They're strong in themselves, just don't like to get hit back.
Right, exactly.
Alright, let's see what we have next. We have the Umbrella Corporation, Master Moose. He actually, the last league we had was in 2nd place. I played him in the championship and barely put it out. He was originally playing a Nurgle team, but we're talking about this season. So now he's playing a vampire team. He's probably one of the, I would say, probably a better player than I am. So
he is really, really technical with how he plays and how he thinks about it. Very strategic.
Yes. So he's kind of hamstringing himself with arguably one of the worst teams in Blood Bowl, the Vampire team.
Yeah, I agree. He's running 3 vampires, and the rest are thralls. So just to kind of explain the vampire situation is the bloodlust is going to be really important here. The hypnotic gaze is a fun thing to do if you can get it to work.
It's more useful when you have a lot of vampires. Early season, we're probably not going to see it, but if he picks up 1 or 2 more vampires, you might see that hypnotic gaze a little bit more often.
Right, but that's, but the managing the bloodlust is going to be almost as important as ball control.
If not more. If he can't get those thralls to stay close, I mean, even down on the ground, the thralls are still useful as just a bloodlust catch, but if those thralls get pushed off the pitch or knocked out or injured, it really takes away his ability to move and get things done without a lot of risk.
Right, and you know, rolling a 1 on the d6 after declaring that movement action where you trigger the bloodlust, he's going to, you know, unless he really manages his thrall placement, he's going to lose vampires, and they're really important to the team.
Yeah.
As the strength 4. Agility 4.
Yeah, Vampire's probably some of the best players in the game. That Bloodlust just brings him down pretty fast. But he does have 5 rerolls, so they can really mitigate that on top of anything else that might go wrong. But with a Vampire team, other than Bloodlust, not a lot of things go wrong.
Right, absolutely.
Alright. We've got Crazy 8s. Now, this is a team I find Corn Demons to be an interesting team, but sometimes I don't find them as the best team out there. Almost team-wide frenzy always sounds like a good thing, but often or not, it's really limiting on what you're able to do until you get a really high-level team.
Being forced to follow up is you don't really get the positional control that a lot of the other teams have. Where if you're not careful about what you do now, it definitely plays into what you're forced to do next. So blocking into a push into a 2-die defender picks, or just not getting the overall odds on the dice that you got the first time is going to be a factor. But, you know, the coach is pretty experienced, and I think that he's going to do a good job of mitigating that.
Yeah, this team's going to come down to a lot of luck, I think. And with only 3 rerolls is not bad, but with only 3, I think that luck factor is going to come in a lot bigger than it could have. However, I think the 2 Heralds might help if used properly, and if he plays a more defensive game with the Cultist. I think starting early on really trying to hit hard, unless he really plans out his blocks, might bite him.
Right, absolutely. And you're absolutely right about the Heralds, because with that Juggernaut, it means that he's going to be able to effectively move somebody who normally wouldn't be moved, especially later when you stand firm and the other attributes like that, where you're not going to get your fend, stand firm, or wrestle skills. Means that he's still going to be able to push people out of the way and make holes.
Yeah, that Juggernaut's also going to help mitigate at least once per turn. As long as he's blitzing with them, is going to mitigate that luck factor, downgrading those both downs to pushes and whatnot. It should help a lot and get field position, like you were saying.
Right, and I think that the thing that he's going to have to focus on is using that frenzy to really open up holes, because being able to move a player 2 spaces, or have the potential to move a player 2 spaces, can really create that pocket that you need in the center of the field or toward the sidelines when it's not for another team as practical.
Yeah, if he can double team and get a couple players off the pitch, which he can do fairly easily, he might actually make enough people, or rather enough of a 2-to-1 advantage to where that frenzy starts becoming a huge advantage rather than almost a disadvantage.
Yeah, let's talk about his choice on the Apothecary.
I actually like the Apothecary for this team.
Say again?
I actually like the Apothecary for this team. I mean, you know, you got the armor value 8, I think, across the board. Heralds also have 8, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
So the Apothecary is not a bad choice. They're relatively expensive players, but I don't know if I would have picked that first with this setup. I might have tried to see if I can squeeze one more reroll out.
See, I agree with that. He also picked up a cheerleader and an assistant coach. So the assistant coach in the beginning is going to aid to the fan factor, or the cheerleader is going to aid to the fan factor, which means that the kickoff roles are generally going to go to his favor.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Though I'm not in the personal area of cheerleaders and assistant coaches in the very beginning, it could make up for the difference of that reroll that he wouldn't be getting. So he might get it anyways, and then still have the apothecary. So depending on how rolls go, once again, the luck factor, he might have more than what I would have had in the beginning.
Right, absolutely. And I think that, you know, one cheerleader and one assistant coach is cheaper than a reroll, but it's not a guaranteed reroll.
Exactly, but it does up the chances of not only you getting it, but mitigating your opponent getting that free reroll.
Agreed.
Alright, Mass Racks, Snarl 2 Smashes. Alright, this is a team that I'm actually quite afraid of. I love orc teams. I know you've played orc teams in the leagues in the past, so you're probably going to have a lot more insight on this team than I do. I haven't often played orcs, but with 3 blitzers and 3 black orcs, this is a scary beginning, and he also managed to squeeze out 4 rerolls on this team.
Right. You see that the blitzers have block, your thrower has pass and sure hands, and your linemen are 5 movement allowance, 3 strength, 3 agility, and everybody but your thrower is armor value 9. So you're not going to see too many of these guys go off the field.
Agreed. This is going to be a really tough team.
Absolutely. You're high strength, and you have a good movement allowance for a lot of your players. What I'd like to see come as the skill tree unfolds for him is to get a catch maybe on one of the linemen maybe, because the thrower with pass isn't as effective as a runner would be, in my opinion. The sure hands is a good thing, but having a movement allowance of 5, he's going to be the primary ball handler, but are the 3 black orcs, excuse me, going to be enough to surround him to be able to support with the blitzers and get that ball upfield?
Yeah, and orcs are one of those enigma teams. I've always seen them as a running team, but they have the thrower available. The thrower is kind of overcosted for what he does, but depending on how well he does and gets, you know, some good rolls on advancement, he could potentially even turn one of the blitzers into a catcher, which wouldn't be a terrible thing. It could get into position quite easily and then catch the ball.
Absolutely, especially because he's got a movement allowance of 6 on the blitzer, plus the block skill, which increases his chances of keeping the ball if he gets into a situation where he needs to block.
Yeah, and these the black orcs, though, are pretty intimidating. They're really tough to get leveled up due to the only having strength 4 with no abilities. He's going to be liable to just get pushes a lot of the time. Depending on how lucky he gets with defender downs and armor penetration rolls, though, those black orcs could level up pretty fast, and if he gets lucky enough to have one of them get the ball for a touchdown, which I don't know if he's going to be risking that this season.
Right, absolutely. And yeah, the black orcs are a high-priced member of the team because of the high strength and the high armor value, but with an agility of 2, you're not really going to be doing too much with them aside from putting them on another player and trying to punch.
Yeah, they're just there to be there and hopefully make a wall for the opponent.
Right.
So we're going to our last team, and probably our only what I would consider an agility team. It's a Wood Elf team from Ducky Shoes. It's also our only female coach, which is very interesting. We've never had one of those before. The Sunday Speedwalkers. This team, I am actually pretty happy with how she put it down. A treeman, a thrower, 2 catchers, and 7 linemen. I think this team can be very scary in the first season.
Oh, absolutely. Especially because we don't have a lot of high movement allowance teams. Having 8 movement allowance for the catchers and 7 for the rest of the team, aside from the treeman, obviously. You're going to see a lot of, I mean, really, the true definition of the agility team, where you're going to see the throws, and and I've seen it, and it's happened to me, unfortunately, where you just can't do anything against the team sometimes when you have dodge plus sprint on the catchers, you get a good kickoff reception, run it up to a good player, hand it off, and then throw it afterwards, and you can eat up almost the entire pitch in one turn if the defense isn't set up ridiculously well. And even if that is the case, that dodge is just, with an agility value of 4, is really difficult to contend with.
Yeah, I think if she utilizes her treatment properly and just avoids allowing the opponent to get free blocks, if she just is able to dodge away and only allow 1 tackle per turn with a blitz, I think she has a really good chance of outmaneuvering all these really punchy teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And she did a really smart thing. She only picked up 2 rerolls.
Which, with an Agility 4 team, you don't need much more than that in the beginning. I think you really rely on your players.
But yeah, we'll definitely have to see how it rolls. But you keyed in on the most important part of this team, and it's not necessarily their offense. It's how you set up the defense with them, because if you go toe-to-toe with any of the other teams in the league, you're going to lose.
Yeah, and this is definitely a team that is going to rely 90% on the coach and making good decisions. This is a risk management team, almost more so, I would say, than the Corn Demons.
I would have to agree with you.
All right. Well, that's the teams. What do you think? Notice that every single team only has 11 players. We're running bare mins with every team.
Yeah, I think that for any sort of ability to challenge another team in the first game of the season, you need to have you need to have spent all your money, in my opinion. You look at some of the options for some of the teams where you're going to have an extra player. What you're doing, in my opinion, is you're taking the ability of one of your players from getting star player points, first off, and you're automatically thinking of week 2.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think there's a couple teams, namely maybe Goblins or Vampires, and maybe even the Wood Elves that could have done with an extra maybe at least 1 person, because you're going to lose someone really fast.
Right.
But it comes to that gambling factor. It's like, how important is that 1 player versus getting that step-up player, that 1 better player?
Right, and I think that's the balance that you're going to have to play. And you know, the first season, or the first game of the season, is you just kind of want to put all your players on the field and have any perks or benefits that you can get, because your reputation in the league has, unfortunately, a little bit to do in how the league is going to unfold. So somebody who got to win the first season or the first game maybe gets MVP player who gets a couple star player points from a touchdown or a pass or an injury, then you have the opportunity to have a significantly better team the second game. And if you spend that extra money on that you normally use on a player for a reroll or an apothecary, I'm of the mindset to do that. But again, I don't really play too many fragile teams. I mean, I know that the Norse aren't really renowned for armor value per se, but at the same time, you have to balance that with your rerolls and use of good prudent use of your rerolls.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. Is there anything you'd else like to say? I think the wrap-up for preseason is pretty good to go.
Well, did you want to just quickly go over which teams were playing which, so that we can kind of have an idea of, now that we've kind of talked about the strengths and weaknesses of the team, we can say maybe how that's going to unfold in the week?
Yeah, and that's a good idea. For the first week matchups, we're going to have the Umbrella Corporation, the Vampire team, versus the Nordic Kneecappers, your team. How do you feel you're going to be able to deal with the Vampires?
As long as I can do a fairly good job of managing to get a couple of the thralls off the field and just play my game, where I'm gonna try to use my movement allowance effectively, use my strength, and keep the block dice in my favor. I think that I could do a pretty good job. I am a little bit concerned about how the vampires with the strength 4 are going to be on the probably their front line. But as long as I can make sure that I'm not leaving any of my guys really exposed, I should be okay.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of that. It's going to come down really to those bloodlust rolls to see if you can stay on the top, because if he forces a turnover on that, I think you can keep on top of him and be able to take him out. Otherwise, I think if those vampires are doing good bloodlust, he has good positioning on his thralls, he might run all over you with the ball.
Right, absolutely. And it really is, it's how it's executed in that matchup.
Yeah. Second matchup are the Pitch Doctors, my team, versus Exactly as Planned, the Chaos team. That one, I probably could have hoped for maybe a little bit better matchup on my first. My matchups for the first few weeks are going to be very dependent, or rather, how well my team progresses, very dependent on who I'm playing against. But that was probably maybe the second or third best team that I could have gone up against.
Right, I agree with that. I think that your job is going to be using those secret weapons as effectively as you can in the beginning, because you know full well that they're not going to be there forever. And if you can, having a high armor value team, you're going to be kind of hard pressed to do any real significant damage to them. But you look at what the overall team brings to the field, I think that you have a very good chance of pulling out the victory. But at the same time, you have to be careful to not leave yourself too far open to the injuries.
I think Chaos is definitely going to be a team that I'm going to have the ability to outmaneuver. But
Right.
I think the Chaos Exactly as Planned, they're going to have a very good chance to rack up the star player points early with injuries on my players. So as long as he get a couple good armor penetration rolls, plays a good defense in the backfield, I think he has a very good chance of not only getting the win, but then being set up very well for week 2.
I absolutely spot on.
Crazy Eights, the Corn Demons team versus the Iron Beer Bellies. At time of recording, we've already seen the game, so we're probably not going to talk too much on what actually happened. I think, honestly, just the way that the teams are made, with how many abilities that the Dwarves have, I can't see it going much beyond the Dwarves winning anyways.
Right. I definitely agree with that. And you look at how the opportunity for the frenzies to kind of pull you out of your comfort zone, especially against a team who's just as steadfast as you are. Be interesting to see how a game like that would play again, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I do think that because we do know the outcome of the game, I think that roles played a factor with that. But it's also the odds of throwing the dice. You have to know what you're gambling on in a game that relies on dice rolls.
Yeah, most definitely. I think once again, that Dwarf team is just a really good team. But I think if the Corn Demons, Crazy Eights would focus on a ball game versus I think it would have had a much better chance. But I think there was a lot of dice being thrown at one another, which, when you have a team that almost 50% has block, that's always going to go in the favor of the block characters.
You're absolutely correct.
For the last matchup, which is probably one of the heavy opposite matchups we could have had, was the Sunday Speedwalkers, the Wood Elf team, versus the Snarltooth Smashes, the Orc team. How do you think that one's going to go?
Well, this is definitely a game where you have to get the other player to play your game, otherwise it's not going to work out.
Yes.
we've got the Black Orcs and the Blitzers that are going to do a fair job of controlling the field, with the linemen doing a good job of kind of filling the holes there. But as long as the Wood Elves can do what they do best and dance around, I think that they have the upper hand here because of the dodge and the movement allowance. But the strength of the Snarltooth Smashes is going to play well as long as they can position their players effectively and try to get some damage done to those elves, because that's really, anybody who plays elves needs to hit the hell out of the elves before they can score and make effective lines for blocking, where you're going to have to dodge more than once.
Yeah, and I think a couple key points for this game is, one, this is probably the matchup that has the two least experienced players together. Not saying that either one of these players is the least experienced in the league, but this matchup has two players that are considerably less experienced than some of the players. So I think that's going to make a huge factor into this, and there might be a lot of bad decisions made. And those bad decisions are usually going to go in the favor of the Orcs if it comes to tackling. But
Right.
field management and field position every time will go into the hand of the Wood Elves. So you almost have an easy, or rather an even choice right there.
Right, absolutely, and that's, bring it back to as long as you can get your opponent to play your game, you're gonna win this, and it's gonna come down to that, I think.
And not to, and one more fact that I think the choice of that tree man, especially for week 1, unless the Orc coach, Masrag, chooses effective positioning with his Black Orcs, I think his Black Orcs might be completely out of this game because of that tree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you don't have the agility to get away from that guy. So as soon as, and most of the time you see new people focus too heavily on the big guy on the field, hoping to do some damage, when really all you want to do is avoid them, because the movement allowance plus and most of the big guys have some sort of action roll trigger where you're going to have to see whether or not the player can even do anything that turn. I personally try to stay away as much as possible unless second half I can just overpower them. But we'll see what the decisions are made. But that tree man is really going to be a big focal point in the center of the field.
Yeah, and I definitely agree, and I think oddly, I think this game is going to be heavily weighted on what the decisions of the two teams for versus that tree versus their players. I think the combination of take root and armor value 10 makes it easy to stay away from, but is he going to be able to keep himself from wanting to attack that tree? We'll have to see.
Right. Good.
All right, well, I think that's everything. We'll probably reconvene after the week is over and do a recap on every game that was played. I think most likely the only games that are going to be actually recorded are going to be the Pitch Doctors versus Exactly as Planned. That will 100% be recorded, and maybe the Speedwalkers versus the Snarltooth Smashes. That one might be recorded, so that will also be posted. Do you have anything else, SK?
No, it was great talking to you today. Coming all the way from Paris, France this time. So
yeah, most definitely.
It's always good to be able to talk to an old friend about an old game.
Yeah, no doubt. And hopefully we can reconvene on another review, and then we'll go from there.
Outstanding. I look forward to it. You have a good one.
You too. And for everybody watching, thank you for watching, and see you guys later. Keep rolling those dice.
Later.